She walked into the lobby with confidence, certain she belonged. But instead of a warm welcome, she was met with cold stares and dismissive words. "We don't have space for you," they said, turning her away in the very place she had built with her own hands. The humiliation cut deep, but what no one in that room realized was who she really was. And when the truth came out, their world collapsed in seconds. So what happens when the owner of the hotel is denied her own room? It had been a long week of meetings, travel, and constant pressure, but finally, she was back in the city she loved. The hotel stood tall, its glass doors reflecting the evening lights of downtown. For her, this place wasn't just a building, it was a dream turned real, a vision she had worked years to bring alive. Every brick, every chandelier, every polished floor carried her touch. She wasn't just walking into a hotel. She was walking into her legacy. But that night, she chose simplicity. No announcements, no attention. She arrived without fanfare, wanting to feel what any ordinary guest would feel. The lobby buzzed with travelers pulling suitcases, couples checking in, and staff moving swiftly behind the counter. She slipped into line, patient and quiet, observing the rhythm of a business she knew better than anyone. And then came the moment that shifted everything. When it was finally her turn, the receptionist's smile disappeared. Papers shuffled. Keys were tapped. Then a cold voice, "I'm sorry, we don't have a reservation under your name." And we're fully booked. It wasn't the words themselves that stung, it was the tone, the look in the receptionist's eyes. A look that said she didn't belong here. That she was less. She glanced at the empty lounge chairs, the unused keys hanging neatly behind the desk, and knew it wasn't the truth. Something deeper, something uglier, was at play. What the staff didn't realize was that the woman they had just turned away wasn't just another customer. She was the reason the hotel even existed. And before the night was over, that truth would leave the entire staff shaken. She stood silently at the counter, letting the receptionist's words hang in the air. The other guests in line shifted awkwardly, some avoiding her gaze, others whispering under their breath. It wasn't the first time she had felt that sting of dismissal, but in her own hotel, it carried a different weight, an insult sharpened by betrayal. The receptionist glanced over her shoulder, calling for a manager. He arrived with an air of authority, his tie crisp, his voice sharp. "Ma'am, as my staff told you, there are no available rooms. Perhaps you should try somewhere down the street." His words were smooth, but his eyes carried the same judgment, the same cold calculation that said she wasn't welcome here. Her chest tightened, but she remained calm, scanning the lobby. She noticed how the staff greeted others with warmth, how they smiled at guests who looked nothing like her, how quickly they found solutions for problems that suddenly became impossible when it was her turn. The truth was clear, and it burned. She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the polished floor, each step echoing louder than the last. The humiliation weighed heavy, but so did her resolve. This was no ordinary slight. This was a public declaration that she didn't belong in a space she had created. And she wasn't about to let it pass. Minutes later, she returned not as a guest, but as the owner. Her quiet dignity gave way to something sharper, stronger. Staff members froze as they recognized her face. The same receptionist who had dismissed her shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence vanishing. The manager's authority crumbled the moment he realized who stood before him. Whispers spread quickly across the lobby. Guests leaned in, watching the scene unfold, phones discreetly lifted to record. The tension grew thick, every eye locked on her as she prepared to reveal the truth. She didn't need to raise her voice. The weight of her presence was enough. And in that moment, the question wasn't whether they would regret their actions. It was how long it would take before the walls they had built with arrogance came crashing down. The manager's voice faltered as he tried to recover, but the damage was already done. Guests leaned forward in their seats, whispering, recording, waiting. The woman who had been turned away only minutes before now stood firmly in the center of the lobby, her posture tall, her silence louder than any shout. Finally, she spoke slow, deliberate, undeniable. "I am the owner of this hotel." The words cut through the air like glass shattering. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then gasps filled the room. The receptionist's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The manager's confidence drained, his tie suddenly too tight, his hands fumbling at his sides. She didn't rant. She didn't rage. Instead, she listed the details only an owner would know, the founding date carved into the cornerstone, the renovation she personally approved, the contract signed with her name. With every fact, their denial crumbled further, leaving them exposed, small, and powerless. Guests began to applaud, not because of spectacle, but because truth had pierced the arrogance that had filled the lobby only moments earlier. The staff shifted nervously, realizing their authority was gone, their security slipping away with every breath she took. Then came the final blow. She turned toward the manager and receptionist, her eyes steady, her voice unwavering. "You don't work here anymore. None of you do." The silence was deafening. The staff froze, their world collapsing in an instant. Phones captured every second, ensuring this moment wouldn't fade quietly, it would echo far beyond the hotel walls. And as the stunned employees tried to comprehend the weight of their dismissal, one truth remained undeniable. The woman they had humiliated had just turned their arrogance into their downfall. The lobby was still buzzing long after the words left her lips. Some guests clapped openly, others shook their heads in disbelief, while the staff, now former staff, stood frozen, unable to process how quickly their power had slipped away. She didn't linger in the chaos she created. With calm dignity, she turned, walking deeper into the building, claiming the space that was always hers. That night, she checked into the hotel under her own name, not as a guest, but as the rightful owner, reclaiming her ground. The irony was heavy. The same desk that had denied her a key only hours earlier now had no one behind it. Their arrogance had written their own resignation, but beyond the spectacle, the weight of the moment cut deeper. It wasn't just about a room. It wasn't just about a hotel. It was about the quiet ways dignity is stripped from people every day, the subtle judgments that say, "You don't belong here." She had the power to fight back, and she did. But what about those who don't? Her story became more than a viral clip. It became a mirror reflecting the ugliness of prejudice hiding in plain sight. Guests who witnessed it would never forget. Those who watched the recordings online would be forced to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. And for the staff who had once smirked at her humiliation, the memory of that night would follow them for years, because sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or protests. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the moment arrogance meets truth, and dignity proves uncheckable. So the question remains, how many more must face the sting of being told they don't belong, before we finally understand that everyone does?